Hey guys, Todd here. Today we're going to install the Revolver X4s on this Jeep Gladiator. Now this is the same install as the Revolver X2. It's also the same install whether or not you have their cargo management system. The Gladiator has some different configurations that may require different tools, but for this installation I will be using a ratchet, a 1/2 inch and 7/16 sockets, T47, T27, T20 Torx, 1/8 inch Allen wrench, a utility knife, electric impact, a fastener removal tool, and a silver Sharpie. Now make sure you're subscribed to our channel to stay up to date with all of our latest content. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now before we get started, I need to point out this truck has a plastic drop-in bed liner. If you have a plastic drop-in bed liner, what you're gonna wanna do is first of all, not put on your bulkhead seal. The plastic liner is up high enough to where you don't need the bulkhead seal. Secondly, it's gonna give you instructions on how to trim out a section of the bed liner. They give you some measurements that you can measure out and trim it out. To make it a little bit easier, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take my rail. This is my passenger side rail. I'm gonna set it in place. I'm gonna slide it all the way up to the bulkhead. And with it set in place, I'm gonna take a silver Sharpie and just outline where this piece of metal is facing the bulkhead. Then I can trim that portion out. Now, one thing I want to point out is that after I've moved the rail away, I went ahead and squared this portion off. The key is you want to make sure that this line right here is even with the top of our bulkhead. Square that off and then repeat the same process on the opposite side. Now, the safest way to trim this liner out is to have the liner removed from the bed of the truck. It's actually very simple to do. Let me show you how to do it. Okay, now the bed liner has 4 anchoring points. The front 2 are right behind the cab. They are our tie-down cleats. What we're going to use to pull those out is a T47 Torx bit. Okay, now at the back we've got 2 anchoring points. They are at our tailgate pillar. They're just a plastic fastener. We're going to take a T20 Torx and we're going to turn it to get it pulled away. I'm going to use a little self-prying tool to give it a little bit of pressure. And pull it out. Do that on both sides. Okay, now that I have all 4 anchor points out, I can reach down and pick up on the center of the liner. Now with my foot, I can draw the edge of the liner out from underneath the side of the bed cap. Once it is unhooked from this side, we can just lift it up and unhook it from the other side and pull it out. All right, now just trim out where you have the lines drawn on both sides. All right, and just repeat that on the opposite side. Okay, now our liner goes back in reverse the way it came out. Okay, now before we install the rail, I want to point out this little part of the bed cap right here. Now in this truck, it's got an opening where you can see the metal flange. On half of the trucks that are out there, there's going to be a piece of plastic covering that up. It looks just like that. If you've got that piece of plastic in there, there's also a scribe line. Just take a utility knife and scribe that line, and this piece will pop right out. Okay, now let me also point out there are a couple of different hole configurations. The one that we have is a hexagon-shaped hole with the open hole that's not threaded down below. If you have the other hole configuration, just refer to your instructions on how to do it. I'm going to show you how to do this one. All right, now included in our kit, we're going to have what's called a jack nut. Now what we're going to do is we're going to insert the jack nut into that hexagon-shaped hole. Once that's in place, we've also got a tool in our kit. Now this tool is going to go over top of the jack nut and hold it still while we insert our 1024 bolt through and then tighten it by hand. All right, so we're going to tighten it by hand first. Once it's hand tight there, we're going to hold it with the tool and then tighten it down with a 7/16 ratchet. What that will do is that will crush the jack nut behind the bulkhead. When the jack nut is fully crushed, you're going to feel some more resistance. So then we can just take and back the bolt back out. And that leaves our installed jack nut. Okay, now everything that I do to the passenger side rail, I'll also be doing to the driver's side rail. So the first thing we got to start is prepping this rail. And you'll notice up here we've got a little rubber pad. That pad has a certain thickness. Now because we have a drop-in bed liner that also has a little bit of thickness, we don't need both of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to peel the rubber pad off of the end of the rail. And just dispose of that. Okay, now we've already got the jack nut installed that's going to coordinate with this hole right here, but we need a fastener to line up these two holes. So in our kit, we're going to have this well nut. And you'll notice on one side, it's very rubbery. The other side has metal threads. The way this is going to be installed is in our kit, we'll also have a longer bolt that has a 1/8 Allen wrench head on the end. And we've got that going through kind of a larger washer that fits the bolt very well. We're going to slide that through the hole. And then on the other side of the hole, we'll take another washer that has a little bit larger opening that's going to slide over top of the bolt. And then we're going to take our well nut and then thread that onto the bolt. And we're just going to draw it down to where it's finger tight. Do not get it any tighter than finger tight. Now we can go ahead and move to the other side of the rail. Okay, now for this end, I'm going to go ahead and flip the rail upside down. Give you a good vantage point of what we're looking at. We've got these two holes here. In our kit, we're going to have some bolts that are a Torx head bolt with a washer attached to them. They're going to come through the opening in that hole. Once we've got those going through, we're going to take a spacer washer and a retainer washer on the opposite side. Spacer washer goes on first, and then the retainer washer, and that's going to slide on. And that holds everything in place so that you have some adjustment and doesn't fall apart. We're going to do that for both of these holes. All right, now we're going to go ahead and lift up our rail. Make sure that our well nut slides into this hole here. Once that well nut is in place, we can go ahead and line up these holes to the threaded holes in the bed cap. Okay, now these two Torx bolts at the back, if I lift up, you'll notice they're kind of lined up to these two threaded holes. What we need to do is get them completely lined up and started into those threaded holes. Now we don't want to tighten them down just yet. We just want to get them nice and started and snug down about finger tight. To snug them down, we're going to use a T27 Torx bit. And now we need to move back to the front. Okay, now we're going to take the same bolt we used to install the jack nut up top, and we're going to slide a washer down into there and then insert it into the jack nut and get it finger tight first. All right, now we're going to hold the rail nice and level and tighten this down with a 7/16. Just get it nice and snug. And we're going to take our 1/8 inch Allen wrench and tighten down our well nut. Again, don't over tighten this. We just want a little bit of torque on there to expand that well nut out. You'll feel it start to give you a little bit of resistance, and then you're all done. All right, now using a T27, we can go ahead and tighten these Torx bolts down and make sure you hold the rail nice and level. All right, now we're just going to repeat those same steps for the rail on the driver's side. Now you are going to have instructions on how to trim the bed liner at your tailgate, but before you do that, gently close your tailgate against the rails and see if anything rubs in the action of the rail against the tailgate liner. There are tolerance differences in these trucks. This particular one, I don't need to trim the tailgate liner. If you have one that rubs on either side, just follow your written instructions on how to do that. Okay, now the cover comes out of the box reverse rolled, so what you're going to do is start at the tailgate end and let it fall towards the tailgate and then start slowly rolling it towards the cab. Now your packaging material you want to bring out. And now what we're going to do is kind of follow it up. Now when we get to the cab side, we're going to see we've got a couple of channels. And what we're going to do is we've got a hardware kit that's going to have some bolts that slide into those channels and line up to the metal tabs on each side. Now once they're lined up to the metal tab, just rotate it over. And we want to try to line up the edge of the vinyl to the edge of the rail. Now with the bolts dropped in on both sides, we can go down underneath and attach the hardware loosely so we can align the cover. All right, now we've got two different bolts coming down. The one closest to the bulkhead, we're going to use a rubber washer followed by a flat washer and then a 1/2 inch head nylock nut. And we're going to get that started to where it gets to the nylock and gives us some resistance, then do the next one. Now this one we're going to use a rubber washer and a flat washer like we did before, but we'll also take one of our straps and then attach the nylock nut. Now we're going to take a 1/2 inch wrench or ratchet and tighten these down just to where they're not quite snugged, where we can still align the cover. Repeat the same on the opposite side. Now we can go ahead and set the alignment of the cover just by rolling it towards the tailgate. Make sure it stays nice and centered in between the rails. All right, once we've got it set exactly where we want it and we make sure that the tailgate can open and close freely, we're going to very gently roll it towards the bulkhead so we don't shift the alignment, and then we can tighten it down from the bottom. And repeat the same on the opposite side. Okay, now whenever you roll up the cover, if it's nice and tight, it will never strike the cab. However, if it's not tight, if it's a little bit loose, you can run into an issue of hitting the cab. So what we're going to do is we're going to see where it hits the cab, and the two rails where it might hit the cab, we're going to rub those down with some isopropyl alcohol and then attach some rubber bumpers on those rails. Well, that concludes the installation. If you found this video helpful, make sure and give us a thumbs up. If you want to know more about the product, check the links in the description below. As always, if you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.